On June 30th, 1989, a routine day in the quiet town of Seymour, Missouri turned sinister when 24-year-old Kelly Workman vanished without a trace. The church cemetery she'd been mowing sat abandoned, with only half of the task completed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, her absence stretched from minutes to hours, leading to a desperate search by her worried family and local authorities. Days passed with no leads until a chilling discovery was made a week later on July 7, 1989, miles away from where Kelly was last seen. In the murky depths of a creek near Mark Twain National Forest, her decaying body was found. The questions were, what exactly happened to Kelly, and who could have committed such a heinous act? Who would have guessed that it would take 35 long years to find those answers? On that fateful Friday afternoon of June 30th, 1989, around 3:30 p.m., Kelly Workman went to the Pleasant Ridge Baptist Church Cemetery to complete her regular chore of mowing its lawn after working her shift at a local store in the nearby community of Dogwood. But by 5 p.m., the sky opened up and rain forced her to go home. After changing her blouse and tending to the cattle, she returned to finish her work. She was also seen by her uncle at around 6:30 p.m. at the cemetery near the intersection of Missouri Highway 14 and Highway Z, just 1.5 miles from her home. Earlier that day, Kelly was her usual responsible self, ensuring everything at home was in order before heading out. Kelly was born on September 22, 1964, in Dogwood, Missouri. She lived with her parents and was responsible and always got home on time. But that day, hours passed, but Kelly was nowhere to be seen. Later that night, her parents made a chilling discovery. Kelly's mower had been left abandoned in the church lot, and the lawn seemed barely touched. Her car was found sitting in the gravel drive with the keys still in the ignition. The community, confused and shocked, rallied together and formed search parties to find her. Given that she'd been tending to the cemetery without fail for 3 years already, her sudden disappearance appeared very unlikely. The following day, even more help arrived, with firefighters and a helicopter joining the search efforts. But the worst news came about a week later, on July 7, 1989. A farmer and his son stumbled upon a heartbreaking sight: a fully clothed, decomposing body submerged in water from the waist down. It was discovered about 10 miles away from the Baptist church in a creek near Mark Twain National Forest in Christian County. Police went to the scene and were horrified to find that the body was in such a state that they could only identify it through dental records. And when the results of the tests came in, they confirmed that it was indeed Kelly. She'd become a victim of a terrible crime, but the cause of her death remained a mystery. Despite thorough inspection, the autopsy couldn't determine if she'd been strangled or suffocated. They couldn't even determine if she'd been sexually assaulted. They concluded that she hadn't been, since she'd been found fully clothed. However, this reasoning didn't seem right to the people of the community or the family. Sadness and shock spread through the town. They wondered, how could something so terrible happen to someone so kind and quiet? The investigation into her death began, but physical leads were scarce, which left authorities puzzled. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, Kelly's family held on to hope and even offered a substantial reward of $10,000 for any information which led to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for her death. But days turned into weeks, and the truth remained elusive. Then a glimmer of hope appeared about 6 months after her murder, when Kelly's mother, Joan Workman, received a chilling call. An anonymous caller phoned their home on the 30th of December 1989 and dropped a hint about seeing someone at the Workman house on the day of the incident. Joan couldn't shake the feeling that Kelly might have known her abductor and killer, considering her cautious nature around strangers, especially men. In August 1990, the police saw a breakthrough. They found their first suspect, Leonard Dwight Banks from Seymour. Police requested Banks to undergo a polygraph test regarding Kelly's murder, which he agreed to take. The examiner posed 3 crucial questions, and Banks denied any involvement. The results appeared to clear his name, and this sent investigators back to square one, grappling with the reality that Kelly's killer still roamed free. As the years passed after Kelly Ann Workman's tragic disappearance and death, her family remained haunted by unanswered questions. Pam Workman, Kelly's sister, couldn't shake the feeling that Kelly may have stumbled upon something dangerous, perhaps drug or illicit money, during her time at the cemetery where she worked. Or maybe she'd overheard something at the Dogwood store that she wasn't supposed to know. Kelly had worked there for just a couple of weekends before her abduction, which added to the mystery surrounding her demise. Then, in July 1996, the spotlight turned to two brothers from Seymour in their 30s, Bobby Banks and Dwight Banks, who were previously cleared as suspects in 1990. Bobby had reportedly failed his polygraph test back in 1990, yet had no charges against him. Dwight was an alcoholic, smoked marijuana, and was also famous for multiple petty crimes in the area, which is why police questioned them directly about what they did with Kellyanne. Dwight admitted to seeing Kelly just hours before her abduction at the Dogwood store where she worked. However, he actively denied any involvement in her murder and claimed that he and Bobby were at home eating fried chicken at the time of Kelly's disappearance. Reports from 1990 surfaced suggesting that Dwight may have taken drugs before passing a polygraph examination. Despite their protests of innocence, suspicions swirled around the Banks brothers. This left investigators confused, with yet another layer of mystery to peel away in the quest for Kelly's justice. On June 9, 1999, a significant development occurred in the investigation. The detectives received warrants to perform DNA testing on Dwight Banks and Wiley Belt, another suspect they'd zeroed in on, in the hopes of connecting them to the case. Despite these warrants, the lab results were never made public, and neither Banks nor Belt faced arrest or charges. In August 1999, Wiley Belt, in an interview with The Citizen, expressed his willingness to cooperate with DNA testing in connection with Kelly's murder. He, just like Banks, admitted to seeing her on the day she was abducted at the Dogwood store, shedding light on his potential involvement in the case. But these DNA tests came out clear and left the police with nothing but another dead end. On June 16, 1999, Dwight Banks consented to a 15-question interview with Fred Spriggs of the Webster County Citizen. During the interview, Banks made a statement expressing his frustration and desire for closure. He said, "It's time to leave me alone or convict me." Then, on September 10, 1999, new Douglas County Sheriff Gary Koop administered a voice stress test to Banks, which is a technique that analyzes shakiness or nervousness in their voice. The idea is that lying makes people stressed, and that stress shows up in how they talk. They probed him about Kelly's disappearance and death. Following the test, Koop reassured Banks and stated that he believed in Banks' innocence. Despite these assurances, the cloud of suspicion continued to loom over Banks. As the years passed, the search for justice in Kelly Workman's case seemed to hit one roadblock after another. On the eve of the 11-year anniversary of Kelly's death in June 2000, her mother, Joan Workman, voiced the family's growing frustration at the lack of progress in the investigation. In July 2000, Michelle Abriel, Kelly's cousin from Seymour, came forward with a startling claim in an interview. She claimed to know the identity of Kelly's killer. It was Dwight Banks. This person aligned with the suspicions of both Joan Workman and Christian County Sheriff Steve Whitney. However, Whitney reportedly informed that Dwight Banks, who was previously considered a suspect, was not responsible for Kelly's murder. The case went cold again. Fast forward to July 1, 2009, the 20-year anniversary of Kelly's abduction and murder. Despite the passage of time, the sheriff's departments in Christian and Douglas counties stated that they had no new leads to report, but they never lost hope of solving it someday. Then, on May 22, 2013, Professor Michael Bowersox, a former prison warden turned forensics professor, offered a glimmer of hope. His class at Drury University conducted a study on Kelly's murder. With the study, they concluded that exhuming her body and reopening the investigation could lead to the resolution of the case and the prosecution of the perpetrators. Most importantly, the report also highlighted alleged negligence in evidence collection and investigative procedures by former officials, which suggested that the case could have been solved years ago in 1989 itself if proper protocols had been followed. Despite the setbacks and missed opportunities, the quest for justice for Kelly Workman continued, fueled by the hope that one day the truth would finally come to light. The investigation seemed stuck, and people were losing faith. They worried it would become yet another one of those cases that everyone remembers, not for who did it, but because it never got solved. The weight of this fear pressed heavily on Kelly's family. Would she ever get the justice she deserved? In a stunning turn of events, after over 30 years, a long-awaited breakthrough finally emerged in the decades-old case of Kellyanne Workman's murder. On February 20th, 2024, a significant development unfolded in the decades-old case of Kellyanne Workman's murder. A Douglas County grand jury indicted 3 men, Bobby Banks, Leonard Dwight Banks, and Wiley Belt, for her 1989 murder. The arrest came after new information surfaced linking the suspects to Kelly's killing, but it was never disclosed to the public. The prosecuting attorney, Matt Weatherman, revealed that a tipster, who was not previously considered a person of interest in the case, provided crucial information in the last couple of months. Further details haven't yet been revealed by the authorities. The charges against the 3 men include first-degree murder, first-degree and first-degree kidnapping in connection with Kelly's abduction and subsequent death. Following their arrest, the Banks brothers and Wiley Belt were taken into custody and held at the Douglas County Jail in Ava, Missouri. Each of them is being held on $250,000 cash bond. The community now awaits further developments in the legal proceedings, hopeful that the perpetrators will be brought to justice for their heinous crimes after 35 years. The long-awaited sentencing will hopefully bring closure to Kelly's family and provide some semblance of peace after years of anguish and uncertainty. On February 27, 2024, the quiet coastal city of Ormond Beach, Florida, known for its pristine beaches and outdoor fun, faced a shocking event. Under a house on the 1300 block of Hand Avenue, authorities discovered a buried body. Initially, the identity was unknown, but forensics soon indicated it could be Autumn Lane McClure, a girl who was missing for the past 20 years since May 10, 2004. After DNA confirmation from her family, it was clear the remains were indeed Autumn's. But the question remains, what led the police to this grim find? And what really happened to Autumn Lane McClure? What kept this case hidden for 2 decades? Autumn Lane McClure, born on April 12, 1987 in Ormond Beach, Florida, was a bright and outgoing teenager who attended Mainland High School. Her charisma shone through in her active participation in various school events, and she was often seen cheering with her classmates during school functions. Despite her vivacity, details about her family life remain scarce, and much about her personal background is shrouded in mystery. At the age of 16, Autumn started working part-time at Winn-Dixie, a well-known supermarket chain in Jacksonville, Florida. During this period, she lived with her grandmother, who provided a seemingly stable home environment. However, life is not without its challenges. One day, after a disagreement with her grandmother, the specifics of which remain unclear, Autumn made the decision to leave. Feeling unsettled and seeking support, she turned to her colleagues at Winn-Dixie. While initially no one could provide the help she sought, eventually a couple who also worked at Winn-Dixie had stepped in, Jessica Freeman and Brian Donnelly, who lived in a trailer at the Sandy O's mobile home park in Ormond Beach, had offered Autumn a place to stay. Seeing this as a beneficial arrangement, Autumn moved in with them, hopeful for a new beginning. Yet, what seemed like a generous offer at the time would later become a focal point of numerous troubling questions surrounding her disappearance. Despite Autumn's decision to move out, she kept in touch with her grandmother, who called her daily to check in. But on May 9, 2004, Autumn didn't answer the phone. Her grandmother assumed that she was busy with work and decided not to call again that day. The next day, May 10th, repeated calls to Autumn went unanswered. Growing concerned, her grandmother reported her missing to the police. The police immediately launched an investigation into Autumn's disappearance. They first questioned Jessica Freeman and Brian Donnelly, the couple she was staying with. The couple said they'd last seen Autumn on May 9th and claimed they had no idea where she was. The police then turned to her grandmother, but unfortunately, she also didn't have any useful information. Following up, the police interviewed Autumn's friends and acquaintances, which led them to her boyfriend, Michael Chelly. He mentioned he'd last seen Autumn on May 10th when he dropped her off at the Volusia Mall in Daytona Beach, Florida. Detectives went to the mall, questioning staff and patrons, but found no clues about Autumn's whereabouts. After a week of investigation, the police still hadn't discovered any significant leads. Later, Autumn's grandmother received peculiar letters, supposedly from Autumn, postmarked from Melbourne, Florida. In those letters, Autumn hinted at plans to return home upon turning 18. Recognizing the potential importance of this information, the police had tried to trace the origin of the letters and gather more intelligence about Autumn's location. Despite their diligent efforts, they couldn't conclusively determine whether the letters were genuinely from Autumn or if someone had fabricated them to mislead the investigation. The investigation into Autumn Lane McClure's disappearance remained tireless. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, no significant breakthroughs surfaced. Hope dwindled among her family and friends as years passed into agonizing silence, and the case eventually grew cold. Despite this, detectives continued their efforts, refusing to surrender to the silence. In a pivotal move, they collected DNA samples from Autumn's relatives and registered her details in the National Missing Children's Database, holding on to a slim thread of hope that someday some information might emerge. 12 years after Autumn vanished, in 2016, a shocking confession rekindled the investigation. Autumn's boyfriend, who had previously claimed he'd dropped her off at Fallujah Mall on the day she disappeared, admitted he'd lied. Instead, he revealed that he'd last seen her at Seabreeze Bridge on May 10, 2004, when she got into a car with an unidentified woman. The reasons behind his initial deception were unclear. It was speculated that he might have lied to distance himself from suspicion or any involvement in her disappearance. Spurred by this new lead, the investigation intensified. Authorities conducted extensive interviews and reviewed CCTV footage from around the bridge area. Unfortunately, they found no trace of the mysterious woman mentioned by Autumn's boyfriend. The absence of new evidence and the elusive nature of the case made it exceedingly difficult for the police to make any substantial headway. Once again, despite their best efforts, the case went cold, shrouded in secrecy and frustration. The pieces of the puzzle remained elusive, and the truth about what happened to Autumn Lane McClure continued to evade the grasp of those seeking answers. In 2018, as the case continued to perplex law enforcement in the community, detectives had decided to reconnect with Jessica, who had since moved to Nevada. Initially, she maintained that she had no information about Autumn McClure's whereabouts. However, the case took a dramatic turn in 2022 when Chris Miller, a relative of Brian and Jessica, came forward. He revealed a startling confession from Brian, who had allegedly admitted to killing Autumn and hiding her body in Volusia County. Brian was living with his girlfriend Jessica and Autumn at the time of Autumn's disappearance. They both worked at the same place where Autumn was after she left home, and both agreed to accept Autumn into their home when she had nowhere to stay. This revelation by Chris came too late to bring Brian to justice. He passed away during a medical procedure on May 26, 2022. The news was a massive blow to the investigation, but it had also opened new avenues for inquiry. Shortly after the revelation of Brian's demise, Jessica reached out to the sheriff's office seeking immunity from prosecution in exchange for her cooperation. Although it was out of the blue for Jessica to ask for immunity, especially when she wasn't the prime suspect, the police went ahead and agreed to her offer, and Jessica began to share crucial information. During the interrogation, which occurred in late 2023, Jessica revealed disturbing details about the sexual relationship between Autumn and Brian. She disclosed that she'd been the one who picked up Autumn from the Seabreeze Bridge on the day of her disappearance and had dropped her off at her home. She also confessed to witnessing a tense moment between Autumn and Brian in the bathroom as he choked her. When she confronted Brian, he threatened her, implying dire consequences if she were to speak of what had transpired. Most crucially, Jessica provided the exact location where Autumn's body was buried, in an area of Ormond Beach. She described how Brian, feeling a grim sense of relief, would visit the burial site, which was eventually built over with a house, to ensure that his deeds remained undiscovered. This breakthrough, while it came many years after Autumn's disappearance, provided some answers to the enduring mystery and offered a semblance of closure to her family and the community. The information also prompted a reevaluation of the evidence and a renewed commitment to ensuring justice for Autumn, even posthumously. When Autumn McClure's body was finally recovered, it marked a somber moment in a long-standing mystery that had perplexed the Ormond Beach community. Sheriff Chitwood reflected on the efforts of the investigative team over the years, expressing a mix of pride and sorrow. Not the result anyone hoped for back in 2004 or at any time since, he said, but I'm very proud of the work that went into this discovery. 20 years later, we can at least say we never gave up on Autumn McClure's case. In his statement, Sheriff Chitwood had also conveyed his condolences to Autumn's family, acknowledging the painful reality that although the case had seen significant progress, the main suspect, Brian Donnelly, had evaded earthly justice since his death in 2022. The sad part is he'll never face the consequences in this world for the evil he perpetrated, Chitwood remarked. He expressed a poignant hope that in his final moments, Brian might have confronted the gravity of his actions. Further details emerged about the motive behind Autumn's death. Jessica, who had provided crucial information leading to the discovery of Autumn's body, suggested that Brian had acted out of fear that Autumn might expose their inappropriate relationship to her family, as she was only 16 at the time, while Brian was 31, potentially leading to serious legal consequences for him. Authorities later concluded that Jessica had no direct involvement in Autumn's demise. Sheriff Chitwood spoke of the closure that finding Autumn's remains could bring to her grieving family.
The family and say, look, here, at least she can be buried with dignity now, not folded up and shoved in some crawl space.
This statement underscored the department's commitment to restoring dignity to Autumn's memory and providing some measure of peace to her loved ones. Detective McGuire, who had written one of the earliest reports on Autumn's case back in 2004, played a pivotal role in leading the investigation that had ultimately led to the discovery of her remains. Sheriff Chitwood confirmed that Jessica Freeman and Brian Donnelly were in a relationship and living together based on a journalist question, and he acknowledged the complexities of their interaction with Autumn. The same journalist then asked about the nature of the relationship between Autumn and the couple, to which Sheriff Chitwood replied affirmatively about the relationship, underscoring the difficult circumstances surrounding Autumn's life and disappearance. When questioned about the family's reaction to the developments, Detective McGuire shared his conversation with Autumn's twin brother. He reported that while the family was relieved to finally have some answers, they weren't surprised, as there'd been long-standing rumors hinting at distressing circumstances surrounding her final days. The family had expressed a profound sense of relief that, after all these years, Autumn had finally been found and could be laid to rest with dignity.